There is a moment most people don't want to face. It doesn't arrive loudly. There is no argument, no dramatic ending, and no clear breaking point. It arrives quietly. It's the moment you realize that the people closest to you are no longer a source of strength but a source of exhaustion. You feel it when conversations leave you drained instead of supported. You notice it when your peace disappears the moment they enter the room. You sense it when you start holding back your thoughts, your excitement, and your honesty, not because you want to, but because it feels safer. At first, you try to explain it away. You tell yourself it's just a phase. You remind yourself of history, of shared memories, of blood ties, of loyalty. You convince yourself that enduring discomfort is the price of connection. But something inside you knows better. Your body feels tense around them. Your mind stays alert, guarded. Your energy never fully returns after interacting with them. And the hardest part is this. You don't want to admit that distance feels like relief. That realization creates guilt. It creates confusion. It creates an internal conflict between who you've always been told to be loyal, patient, understanding, and what you are actually experiencing: fatigue, frustration, and emotional depletion. Stoicism does not ask you to suppress this realization. It asks you to examine it honestly. Because the Stoics understood something most people ignore. Your inner peace is not fragile. It is being drained. Relationships rarely become unhealthy overnight. They deteriorate slowly, almost invisibly. At first, it's small. A comment that lingers longer than it should. A tone that feels dismissive instead of supportive. A pattern where you give more than you receive emotionally, mentally, energetically. You notice that conversations revolve around their needs, their problems, and their opinions. When you speak, the energy shifts. When you share something important, it's minimized, redirected, or ignored. Over time, your awareness sharpens. You start preparing yourself before interactions. You rehearse what you'll say. You filter your words. You brace for reactions. That's not connection. That's adaptation. And adaptation has a cost. The mind becomes hypervigilant. The nervous system stays activated. You're no longer present, you're managing. Stoicism teaches that misalignment reveals itself through disturbance. When something repeatedly disrupts your inner balance, it is not a coincidence. It is information. This is the phase where most people stop listening. They label their discomfort as weakness. They convince themselves they're overthinking. They accept emotional strain as normal. But awareness is not overthinking. Awareness is clarity trying to emerge. And clarity is uncomfortable before it becomes liberating. Here is a truth that must be stated clearly. Protecting your peace is not selfish. Creating distance from harmful dynamics is not betrayal. Choosing self-respect over emotional exhaustion is not cruelty. Stoicism does not teach endurance at all costs. It teaches discernment. The Stoics believe that your first responsibility is the condition of your mind. Because when the mind deteriorates, everything else follows. Guilt often comes from confusing tolerance with virtue. From believing that suffering quietly makes you noble. From thinking that loyalty means self-abandonment. But virtue is not submission. Virtue is alignment with reason. If a relationship consistently undermines your mental stability, emotional balance, or sense of self, continuing it blindly is not moral, it is careless. Stoicism does not ask you to stay where you are diminished. It asks you to act with wisdom, restraint, and clarity. You are allowed to step back without hatred. You are allowed to choose distance without drama. You are allowed to protect your inner world without explaining yourself endlessly. Moral clarity does not require permission from others. It requires honesty with yourself. Stoic philosophy is often misunderstood as emotional suppression. In reality, it is emotional intelligence disciplined by reason. The Stoics observe that most suffering does not come from events, it comes from prolonged exposure to what contradicts our nature. Human beings require respect, reciprocity, and psychological safety to function well. When those elements are consistently violated, the mind enters survival mode. This is why Stoicism emphasizes boundaries, judgment, and voluntary distance. Not as punishment. As protection. The Stoic does not cling to what harms them. They do not argue endlessly with reality. They observe patterns, accept truth, and act accordingly. Distance, in Stoic terms, is not rejection. It is strategic withdrawal. Just as the body steps away from physical danger, the mind must step away from emotional danger. And this is where clarity begins. Because once you stop justifying what drains you, you begin reclaiming authority over your life. In the next part, we will examine the first 4 unmistakable signs that a relationship has crossed from meaningful into damaging. Not through emotion. Not through blame. But through clear, observable patterns. These signs are not opinions. They are signals. And learning to recognize them is the first step toward reclaiming your peace. Not all harm is loud. Some of it arrives quietly, disguised as humor, honesty, or concern. Belittling rarely looks like open aggression. It appears in subtle moments, the comments that linger, the tone that undercuts, the reactions that quietly dismiss who you are becoming. You share an idea, and it's met with skepticism rather than curiosity. You express excitement, and the response drains the energy from the room. You talk about progress, and it's reframed as unrealistic, naive, or unimportant. Over time, these moments accumulate. The danger of belittling is not the comment itself. It is the psychological conditioning that follows. You begin to edit yourself. You soften your ambitions. You stop sharing what matters to you, not because you lack confidence but because you've learned that enthusiasm invites discomfort. Stoicism teaches that dignity is internal, but it is shaped by environment. When a person consistently undermines you, they are not offering realism. They are exerting control. Belittling is often a projection of unresolved insecurity. People who feel threatened by growth attempt to shrink it. People uncomfortable with their own stagnation resist being reminded of movement. The long-term consequence is erosion of identity. You start living below your capacity to avoid friction. You choose silence over authenticity. You confuse peacekeeping with peace. The Stoic response is not confrontation fueled by emotion. It is observation followed by withdrawal. You do not argue with someone who benefits from your self-doubt. You reduce emotional access. You stop offering vulnerability where it is mishandled. Respect cannot be negotiated into existence. If it is consistently absent, distance becomes wisdom. A relationship becomes psychologically unsafe when accountability disappears. Some people are never at fault. Every conflict is reframed. Every mistake is redirected. Every consequence is someone else's responsibility. When you raise a concern, the focus shifts to your tone instead of their behavior. When you express hurt, it is labeled as sensitivity. When facts are presented, they are denied, distorted, or minimized. This pattern is not confusion. It is self-protection at your expense. Stoicism places responsibility at the center of character. Without accountability, growth is impossible. A person who refuses to acknowledge their actions forces you into an unfair role. You become the mediator, the fixer, the emotional regulator. You carry weight that does not belong to you. Over time, this creates self-doubt. You question your memory. You question your reactions. You question whether you are the problem. That is the hidden damage. Stoic wisdom is clear. You cannot reason with someone who avoids truth. You cannot build stability with someone who rewrites reality. The response is clarity, not argument. You stop chasing validation. You stop explaining yourself repeatedly. You set boundaries around responsibility. A relationship without accountability is not mutual. It is draining. Distance restores balance when dialogue no longer can. Some relationships feel warm but only on demand. The connection activates when they are struggling. When they are bored. When they need reassurance, support, attention, or resources. Once their need is met, the connection fades. This dynamic is not subtle. It is repetitive. You are contacted during their moments of chaos. You are absent during their moments of stability. Your role becomes functional, not relational. Stoicism teaches that true connection is reciprocal. Not equal at every moment, but balanced over time. A one-sided dynamic creates dependency, not bond. The psychological cost is slow but severe. You start associating your worth with usefulness. You prioritize their crises over your stability. You suppress your own needs to remain available. And when you finally require support, the silence is revealing. This is not neglect by accident. It is a pattern of extraction. Stoic clarity demands evaluation of actions, not words. Consistency reveals intention. Presence reveals value. You are not obligated to remain accessible to those who only engage when it benefits them. Limiting access is not punishment. It is resource management. Your energy is finite. Protecting it is rational, not cold. Boundaries define where you end and others begin. They are not ultimatums. They are expressions of self-respect. When someone repeatedly ignores your limits, they are not confused. They are testing. Disrespect often hides behind dismissal. Your discomfort is trivialized. Your limits are mocked. Your clarity is framed as rigidity. Each time you allow a boundary to be crossed without consequence, you reinforce a dangerous lesson that your needs are negotiable. Stoicism teaches that dignity is preserved through action, not explanation. A boundary only functions when it is enforced. The internal damage of ignored boundaries is cumulative. You begin to doubt your right to say no. You tolerate discomfort to avoid tension. You shrink your needs to maintain access. Healthy individuals adjust their behavior when a boundary is set. Unhealthy ones challenge it. That response reveals everything. The Stoic response is quiet firmness. You state your limit clearly. You observe behavior. You reduce access if disrespect continues. Boundaries are not meant to convince others. They are meant to protect you. When someone refuses to respect your limits, they lose proximity to your life. That is not harsh. That is alignment. These first 4 signs reveal a single truth. When respect, accountability, reciprocity, and boundaries disappear, the relationship is no longer neutral, it is harmful. One of the most painful realizations in life is understanding that not everyone close to you wants to see you rise. At first, it's subtle. You share progress, and the response feels flat. You mention improvement, and the energy shifts. You speak about change, and the support becomes conditional. There is no open hostility. No direct opposition. Just a quiet resistance. This resistance shows itself in small ways. Your achievements are minimized. Your efforts are questioned. Your goals are reframed as unrealistic or unnecessary. Stoicism teaches that envy does not originate in comparison. It originates in unresolved dissatisfaction. When someone feels threatened by your growth, it is not because you are doing something wrong. It is because your movement highlights their stagnation. The danger is not their envy. The danger is your response to it. Over time, you may begin to share less. You may lower your ambitions in conversation. You may reduce your visibility to maintain comfort. This is how self-betrayal begins. Stoic clarity demands that you do not dim your development to preserve someone else's comfort. Growth is not arrogance. Progress is not betrayal. Those who value you will not compete with your evolution. They will adapt to When support disappears as you rise, believe the signal. Not everyone deserves access to your becoming. A relationship becomes psychologically dangerous the moment you stop being yourself. You calculate your words. You anticipate reactions. You suppress honesty. Not because you lack courage, but because honesty has consequences in this environment. Walking on eggshells is not sensitivity. It is fear. Your nervous system remains alert. Your mind scans for signals. Your body never fully relaxes. This state is not connection. It is survival. People who create this dynamic often do so through unpredictability. Mood shifts. Silent punishments. Guilt-driven reactions. Over time, you assume responsibility for their emotional stability. You manage their reactions. You regulate their discomfort. Stoic philosophy warns against this form of emotional dependency. When your sense of safety depends on another person's mood, you lose sovereignty over yourself. Healthy relationships allow disagreement without threat. Honesty without punishment. Presence without fear. If someone requires you to shrink, silence yourself, or perform emotional labor to keep the peace is not real. The Stoic response is not emotional confrontation. It is awareness followed by distance. Fear has no place in a relationship built on mutual respect. Time is life measured in moments. When someone repeatedly disregards your time, they are not being careless. They are revealing priorities. Patterns matter. Chronic lateness. Last-minute cancellations. Interruptions without consideration. Your commitments are treated as flexible. Their needs are treated as urgent. Over time, this conditions you to deprioritize yourself. You rearrange your schedule. You delay your goals. You apologize for having structure. Stoicism places immense value on time because it is the one resource that cannot be recovered. A person who respects you respects your time. They understand that your focus, responsibilities, and rhythm matter. Disrespecting time is a subtle form of dominance. The Stoic response is calm reclamation. You stop explaining excessively. You stop accommodating repeatedly. You protect your schedule with quiet firmness. Those who respect you will adjust. Those who resist reveal themselves. Your time is not negotiable by default. Sometimes the clearest truth requires no explanation. Pay attention to how you feel when distance grows. Your breathing slows. Your thoughts settle. Your energy returns. This is not avoidance. This is information. The body recognizes misalignment before the mind accepts it. If someone's absence brings clarity instead of longing, the relationship has already been evaluated by your nervous system. Stoicism teaches that harmony is a signal of alignment with nature. Disturbance is a signal of contradiction. When presence creates tension and absence creates peace, the choice becomes clear. Distance is not punishment. It is protection. You do not need conflict to justify space. You do not need closure to reclaim peace. Relief is evidence. Ignoring it is self-neglect. This is where the real decision emerges. Not about them. About you. How much of yourself have you compromised to maintain access? How often have you ignored discomfort to preserve familiarity? How many times have you chosen obligation over alignment? This is not about blame. It is about cost. The cost of staying silent. The cost of shrinking. The cost of emotional erosion. Stoicism teaches that the greatest betrayal is self-abandonment. You cannot build a disciplined mind while remaining in environments that weaken it. This moment requires courage, not confrontation. The courage to stop negotiating your worth. The courage to choose clarity over attachment. The courage to walk away without hatred. This is where strength replaces guilt. In the final part, we will bring everything together. Not with intensity, Not with urgency, but with calm resolution. We will examine how Stoic discipline restores balance, how distance becomes alignment, and how peace becomes your final measure. Once clarity arrives, everything changes. Not externally, internally. You stop asking whether your feelings are justified. You stop replaying conversations. You stop preparing defenses for choices that protect your peace. Stoicism teaches that peace is not something you negotiate for. It is something you preserve through discipline. Distance, when chosen wisely, restores order. It removes constant stimulation. It quiets emotional noise. It allows the mind to return to itself. This is not avoidance. It is self-command. The Stoic does not create enemies. They create space. They understand that not every relationship is meant to follow you into every phase of life. Some connections exist for learning. Some exist for endurance. And some must end so clarity can begin. When you step back without resentment, you regain authority over your emotional world. Boundaries stop feeling like conflict. Silence stops feeling like weakness. Peace stops feeling undeserved. This is what self-respect looks like in PR. Actice. Distance often carries a false reputation. People confuse it with coldness, with abandonment, with ego. But Stoic philosophy reframes distance as alignment. Alignment with values. Alignment with reason. Alignment with your mental well-being. You do not need to explain your clarity to those who benefit from your confusion. You do not need to justify boundaries to those who never honored them. You do not need permission to protect your inner world. Stoicism teaches that what is not under your control must not be allowed to control you. You cannot control how others respond to your boundaries. You can control whether you remain exposed to what drains you. Choosing distance is not dramatic. It is deliberate. It is the decision to stop participating in patterns that require you to shrink. And that decision changes everything. At the end of this reflection, the question is not whether others will understand your choice. The question is whether you finally understand yourself. You were not designed to live in constant emotional defense. You were not meant to negotiate your dignity. You were not created to be a container for unresolved chaos. Stoicism reminds us that the mind is a sanctuary. And sanctuaries are protected, not compromised. When you choose clarity over guilt, something stabilizes inside you. When you choose strength over attachment, something solid forms. When you choose peace over outdated loyalty, you return to yourself. Distance does not destroy real relationships. It reveals which ones were built on respect and which ones were built on tolerance. And tolerance, when it costs your identity, is not virtue. It is erosion. Relationships are meant to strengthen you, not diminish you. They should bring clarity, not confusion. Support, not self-doubt. If someone consistently drains your energy, crosses your boundaries, dismisses your growth, or unsettles your inner world, that is not something to endure. That is something to understand. Stoicism does not ask you to harden your heart. It asks you to discipline it. To choose what you allow near your mind. To walk away without hatred. To create space without explanation. To protect your peace as something sacred. You do not owe access to those who harm your clarity. You owe honesty to yourself. And honesty, when acted upon, becomes freedom. If this reflection resonated with you, take a quiet moment and acknowledge it. You may choose to affirm it privately. Or you may choose to share it. Simply state what you are choosing now. I choose clarity. I choose self-respect. I choose peace.